Salvete discipuli, hodie spectatis lectoram trēdecimam capitis triginta tres. Conditions. Hodie discemus. Primum vocabula capitis triginta tres. Dende grammaticam capitis. We'll learn conditions or conditional sentences, otherwise known as if statements. There are three types taking the indicative: the simple fact present and simple fact past, and the future more vivid. And there's also three types that take the subjunctive mood: the present and past contrary to fact, and the future less vivid. We'll sort that all out at the end. Primum discemus verba vocabulorum capitis triginta tres. In hoc capite sunt duo verba, recusso, trado. Primum verbum, recusso, recusare, recusavi, recusatum. Ei offeram id quod recusare non potest. Quid significat recusso? Ultimum verbum, trado, tradere, tradidi, traditum. Bello civili finito, traditores se tradiderunt. Quid significat trado? Nunc discemus nomina vocabulorum capitis triginta tres. In hoc capite sunt quinque nomina: initium, ops, plebs, sal, speculum. Primum nomen, initium, initii. Ab initio cursus, viri saepius quam feminae praestant. Heu inaequissimam. Quid significat initium? Proximum nomen, ops, opus. Qui plurimas opes habent, opem pauperibus ferant. Quid significat ops? Proximum nomen, plebs, plebis. In civitate Romana, patricii superbius credebant se meliores plebe esse. Quid significat plebs? Ecce patricii, patricius, patricia, ecce plebes. Quid significat plebs? Proximum nomen, sal, sales. Tradas mihi salem. Quid significat sal? Ultimum nomen, speculum, speculi. O speculum in miro speculum, quis est pulcherrima omnium? Quid significat speculum? Nunc discemus adjectiva vocabulorum capitis triginta tres. In hoc capite sunt tria adjectiva: candidus, merus, suavis. Primum adjectivum, candidus, candida, candidum. Romani honores petentes se togis candidis vestiebant. Quid significat candidus? Ecce vir Romanus in toga candida. Quid significat candidus? Proximum adjectivum, merus, mera, merum. Graeci Romanique, cum vinum merum numquam biberant, aqua miscebant. Quid significat merus? Ecce Deus Bacchus. Bacchus est Deus vini. Quid significat merus. Ultimum adjectivum, suavis, suave. Quid est suavius, quam hostes tuos victos videre? Quid significat suavis. Nunc discemus alias partes loquendi vocabulorum capitis triginta tres. In hoc capite sunt uno adverbium, subito, et una interjectio, heu. Primum et ultimum adverbium, subito. Quid significat subito? Est idem verbum in lingua italiana, lingua quae in musica utitor. Prima et ultima sola interjectio. Interjectiones, oops. Heu, ab initio cursus, viri saepius quam feminae praestant. Heu inae quissimum. Quid significat heu? Heu errorem meum. There we go. Okay, so to introduce the grammar for this chapter, we're talking about conditional sentences or conditions, otherwise known as if statements. And if you've seen the Disney animated movie Hercules, this is a great way to learn if statements because one of the running gags in the movie is when Pain and Panic, the little demon helpers of Hades, multiple times in the movie, they get into a situation where they're like, if Hades finds out, he is going to kill us. Or if Hades gets out of there, he's going to kill us. And then Panic reminds Pain, or Pain reminds Panic, you mean if he finds out. You mean if he gets out of there. And then Panic says, if. If is good. So yes. So let's talk about those types of statements. If Hades gets out, he's going to kill us. If. Okay? So what we see here in a condition is basically it's an if statement. In other words, the if clause is a dependent clause, a subordinate clause that tells you the condition that needs to be met so that the main clause can work, right? So in other words, the main clause depends upon the if clause happening. Okay, so Hades has to find out in order to kill these two guys, even though they're probably immortal. Anyway, grammatically, the if statement is called the protasis, okay, which literally means it's arranged first, it's placed first, but it doesn't necessarily have to be first, right? It's the thing that have to happen first in order for the other thing to happen. The other thing, which is the main clause, is the apodosis, which means the result or the payoff, literally, okay? So the protasis has to happen in order for the apodosis to pay off, okay? So these are Greek words that mean those things, essentially. Okay, so that's the if statement from Disney. So what we'll work with if statements, conditions from out here, is we're going to use the same if statement. We're going to modify it in different tenses and moods in order to kind of show you the different types of if statements you can make. So let's start with present conditions, okay? And we'll start with the simplest of the simple, okay? The simple fact present, in which both the protasis and apodosis, okay, both the if statement and the result, use the present indicative, okay? So here we go. If you are Roman, you are a friend, okay? So you have to be Roman in order to be a friend, okay? So the being Roman is the condition that needs to be met in order for you to be a friend, okay? So that uses the present indicative in both the protasis and the apodosis. Si Romana es, amica es, okay? what if I say contrary to fact using the imperfect subjunctive? Were you Roman, you would be a friend. Si Romana esses, amica esses. Okay? So these are both present conditions, but they are using different tenses and moods of the subjunctive. Okay? So what's the difference between the two? Well, a simple fact present, or a simple fact condition, any condition really that uses the indicative, you're making the if statement with confidence, right? You are implying or heavily suggesting that the if statement is true. Okay? So in other words, if you are Roman, and I believe you are, and it's very likely that you are a friend. Okay? Whereas a contrary to fact condition, a contrafactual condition, suggests that the if statement is actually not true. You're not confident in that. Were you a Roman, you would be a friend. So by saying were you a Roman, you're implying that the person you're talking to is not Roman. But if they were, they would be a friend. Okay? So that's the difference between an indicative using simple fact condition, okay, and a contrafactual condition, okay, which uses the subjunctive. And that makes sense because the indicative is for statements of fact or allegations of fact, and the subjunctive mood is for counterfactual things, right? Alternative potentialities, right? Things that aren't necessarily true, okay? So that's the difference. So if you're talking about a situation in the present tense, use the present indicative. If you think it's true, use the imperfect subjunctive if you don't think it's true, okay? So those are present conditions. Now let's go to past conditions. And guess what? It operates the same way as the present conditions, just using different tenses and moods. So let's talk about the simple fact past. If you were Roman, you were a friend. Si Romana eras, amica eras. Okay? So again, uses a past tense in the indicative. So the imperfect, perfect, or pluperfect can all be used in a simple fact past condition, right? So if you were Roman, you were a friend. You're saying that, suggesting that you were Roman, okay? Okay, what about the Bizarro Universe version of that? The contrary to fact past, which always uses the pluperfect subjunctive. Had you been Roman, you would have been a friend. Okay, and notice that you're using would in English, which is sort of how English does the subjunctive, right? Si Romana fuisses, amica fuisses. Okay, so had you been Roman, and this suggests that you were not, you would have been a friend. Okay? All right, finally, future conditions, right? So future conditions are divided between what's called the future more vivid and the future less vivid, okay? You could also call it the simple fact future and the contrary to fact future if you want to be consistent, but I think more vivid and less vivid give you more a sense of what it's trying to suggest. Okay, so future more vivid is the part that uses either the future tense or the future perfect. Often you will see the future perfect in the protasis for a future more vivid. Okay, so watch out for that. Okay, so si Romana eris or si Romana fueris, okay, future perfect, amica eris. If you will be Roman, if you'll become Roman, let's say, you will be a friend. Okay, it's called the future more vivid because you have a more vivid view of the future. You have more confidence, and you're saying it as if this future possibility will be likely. You think this is going to happen. If you will be Roman, you will be a friend. I expect you to be Roman. Okay. The future less vivid is as it suggests. It's less likely to happen. Okay, and so you're treating it less as an inevitability and more as a faint possibility, but unlikely to happen. Okay, should you be Roman, you would be a friend. Okay, or if you should be Roman. Okay, but this is a better way to say it in English. Should you be Roman, you would be a friend. Some people call this a should-would condition. Okay, the future less vivid, a should-would condition. Okay, so should starts the protasis, would starts the apodosis. Okay, so si Romana sis, amica sis. Note that since there's no future subjunctive in Latin, Latin will use the present subjunctive for the future less vivid. And so that's one of the tricky parts. Okay, so a present subjunctive for the future less vivid, And for the present contrary to fact, you use the imperfect subjunctive, right? Were you Roman, you would be a friend. Okay, so that's how it works. All right. So once again, just to review, let's go through this once more. So present conditions, simple fact uses the present indicative. Contrary to fact, imperfect subjunctive. Past conditions, simple fact past, imperfect, perfect, or pluperfect indicative. Contrary to fact, pluperfect subjunctive. And future conditions, more vivid uses the future or future perfect indicative, and future less vivid uses the present subjunctive. Okay, so hopefully that'll help you get those straight, and that's it. Volte, discipuli.